Okay, guys, you know the usual spiel, but normally I would be here to tell you that there are actually spoilers in this review, but I actually don't think there are. Wait, don't tell them that this doesn't have actual spoilers. You spoil absolutely everything about this game. It's me, Evan, from the future, to correct all the mistakes that you're about to make. Don't tell them. Okay, never mind. I guess there are actually spoilers in this. Okay, I don't really know how to start this. I beat Romeo as a Deadman, and I feel like the more that I try to explain this game to people, the less justice I feel like I do it. Well, I can't say that this game feels like a game that would have come out during like the Xbox 360 or PS3 era, but it's kind of like a cult classic type of feel, you know, which I feel like is the consensus with Suda 51 games. I'm not gonna lie, I've never played a Suda 51 game, but I do feel like his games have more of a cult following than any sort of like mainstream success. And I think the trend kind of continues with Romeo as a Deadman. I won't lie. It continues with Romeo as a Deadman, but I don't think that means you should kind of write it off. But what I do feel like is that most people who like Suda 51 games are probably going to be the people that like this. And I don't know if it's going to win over any extra people. I have to say the game is like it's like a creative roller coaster. And I mean that, I don't really know how to explain that, but the game, if I were to try and sum it up based on how the game opens up in a way where they've created like a diorama of where the game takes place, or like the city where Romeo lives, because the main character's name is actually Romeo. It opens up in the city where he lives, and they've created like a 3D diorama that I guess they scanned into the game's engine, where they explain like, oh, this is what's happening, this is where I've lived for most of my life, it's like a boring city, yada yada yada. You know, it's kind of like an anime opening type of deal, but they do that, and then we get into an in-engine cutscene where we're driving through. I'm not going to try and explain the story. I am actually going to do it justice in this sense, and where I think the game has like deep symbolism and some analogies going on, but I would be doing a disservice if I made any sort of attempt to try and make sense out of it. I like sitting here and thinking about it after I finished it, but anyway, we're in an in-engine cutscene driving through, I guess, Deadford, Pennsylvania, the fictional place they've made up, unless it actually exists. I don't know. I've never been to Pennsylvania, but the fictional place where Romeo lives, and Romeo sees a dead body out in the street. Turns out it's like a zombie, and he gets bit, is on the verge of dying. His grandfather comes through on a time-traveling space bike, saves Romeo by injecting him with, I can't remember what it's called, but it turns him into a half-dead, half-alive person, or a dead man is what they call him. And the story just goes from there. You know, there's after that, I think there's multiple timelines, because that happens, and then right after they explain that happens to Romeo in a different circumstance. So I'm not really sure if there's like multiple Romeos in different timelines or whatever's going on, but that does happen. And you know, we become Deadman, and apparently our goal is to kill Romeo's, I don't really know what they are. It's you could say for simplicity's sake, you could say it's his girlfriend, but our goal is to jump through we're recruited by the FBI space-time police, and our goal is to stop Juliet, who exists in like multiple timelines, and is basically any timeline she shows up, Deadford, Pennsylvania disappears, and that's basically like a time travel anomaly, and we need to stop those from happening. So we got to go stop Romeo's girlfriend and basically save time, all of time. It's a lot to take in, but I think the game knows that. I don't know where I'm gonna go from there, but so the game itself is more of a hack and slash game with a bunch of different visual elements slapped onto it, I think, in the way that it's telling its story. And I think that's probably its greatest strength. The combat's not the greatest, but it's not shallow, but it's not gonna be as deep as I think like modern games where you have like parry mechanics, you have a skill tree, and you learn skills as you do this and that, and you level up and you put your stats here and there. They do have stats, but they're not super dense. Not dense. The stats don't go that deep. It's mostly like this does more attack power, this does more attack power. You get your special faster, and you stagger enemies. That's basically all that you can upgrade. You can unlock more weapons, but they more or less do the same thing. The guns feel the most distinct because you have a shotgun, a pistol, a rocket launcher, and assault rifle. So most of the game, you're going to be going through and hacking away at enemies through pretty tame maps. The maps aren't like super crazy, but honestly, they're kind of passable. You know, they're not anything that I think I will remember, but for some reason that didn't really matter to me. I just think that like what the game is trying to present, it doesn't go too far, and that's probably to its benefit because it doesn't try to be anything deeper than it actually is in that sense. And I think what it really wants you to do is be on this funky roller coaster ride and just kind of enjoy it. You know, I think that's kind of mostly what it's there to do. And so going back to the combat, the best part about the combat, actually, there is a really cool thing. They have bastards. The enemies are called rotters, but you get these things called bastards, which are essentially like, I'm just going to call them your Pokemons for simplicity's sake, but you can like grow them in a little farm on your spaceship and you can bring them into battle, and they do a bunch of different things. You know, one of them, the first one I had, they have names too. They get names whenever you grow them. And the first one I had, what was her name? I think it was Jessica. I think it was Jessica maybe. But when you summoned her, she just caused an explosion that knocked enemies down. Or I had one that like you could shoot lasers. There was one I had that was really good where you could basically send enemies into a wormhole, like a portal on the ground, and they would fall out in front of you and be staggered. The one thing I did like about the combat is that most of the things that apply to the small enemies apply to bosses. So I feel like when I play games, most times in these days, like in combat, the stuff doesn't really apply to the boss. So like this move could be like, oh, this move will catch an enemy on fire, but then when you actually go to a boss, they don't actually catch on fire. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. But I like Romeo is a Deadman's combat in the sense of like I can use most like 90% of my abilities and they're going to affect the boss in the same way. So like when I was saying that one of the bastards sends enemies into a time portal, or not a time portal, a portal on the ground, and then it drops them in front of you stunned. You can do that to a boss. So you can like set up some stuff to where you can stagger lock a boss. You can like get him locked in a combo basically. And that's kind of where the mastery of Romeo is a Deadman's combat that's kind of like the peak of it. It's like figuring out what moves can I use to make sure I can do the most damage to a boss without them retaliating. So like I had one where a bastard could slow down time, send them through the portal and stun them, and then I had one that could also knock them down. So I would, combo them, slow them down first, do my damage because they weren't fast enough to hit me. Then once that was over, put them in the portal. Then they were stunned. Once they got unstunned, knock them back down. They're still stunned. Then you have a special technique called Bloody Summer, which builds up as you do damage to enemies. That staggers them. So you do that, wash, rinse, repeat. Once you get that, you're just stun locking a boss the whole time. So that is actually like really fun. It makes you seem like super busted, and like he does a bunch of flashy moves that don't really amount to more than pressing square and triangle, but it's still cool. And the story, I think, if I'm to explain it very simply, you're like an FBI space police cop who, you're a cadet. You got newly recruited after you became Deadman. And they're out on a search to try and kill Juliet, Romeo's girlfriend. They weren't in a relationship for that long from what I know, but it's his girlfriend, and you're out to go and get her. They recruit you specifically because you have a strong emotional connection to her. There's also some fugitives that they work into the game. What is it? Christian Phantasm, Magris, and I don't remember. Dr. Hill. And they're like space-time fugitives. So it kind of like helps the game's world building to make you feel like you're this like space-time cop. And the game presents itself in a way where like it's like each episode you're like combating one of those space-time fugitives or a random Juliet. We're looking for the Juliet that Romeo in our game knows from his timeline. There's other Juliets from different timelines because that's why we're after her in the first place. She's just like an anomaly that keeps different versions of her keep showing up in different timelines. So occasionally one of your episodes will be like, facing off one of those Juliets that's not the one that Romeo's looking for, but it's just another Juliet that's from another timeline, right? So she's also causing problems. So yeah, it's basically about that. Like if I were to cut it off there, we're space cops stopping Juliet, and I will leave it there for the most part. I do think there's like some deeper stuff. Like I'm going to spoil it. There's probably always going to be spoilers when I talk about games, but there's some deeper stuff. I think like when I got to the end, I started realizing that, Romeo has this catchphrase that he says, I think in the beginning, and then he says it at the very end when you beat the final boss, and he says, kill the past. And I think that's kind of the motif for the game, is like basically getting over your past and overcoming it, lest that be the thing that destroys you, because you defeat a lot of enemies who can't get over their past. Their past is explained to them. Like the first boss, Christian Phantasm, will explain his past to you. Dr. Hill gets his past explained to you. Magris gets his past explained to you. And Romeo obviously is battling with his past, and I think as he's kind of overcoming it, his mask will change like throughout the game, and I think as he's kind of overcoming it, things start to change. Every morning he'll like wake up and drop his coffee, and there is one sequence where there's one episode where he knocks over his coffee, but he catches it that time. And there's another thing I realized, like once you beat the boss, obviously that's Romeo, I think, overcoming his past, because he keeps looking for Juliet. It's this thing that he can't get over, and then once he kind of like accepts and lets her go, I think is when he actually, like, that's supposed to be like a narrative symbolism for like letting go of your past and looking forward to the future and like focusing on the present and whatever, you know, because there is this I think it's also about like settling in your reality, because there's this thing that Romeo has. There's like this tick, that not a tick, but like he doesn't like coffee, and so he really likes hot chocolate. And so me, using my big brain, my deep brain, I was like, oh, he prefers when things are sugary and sweet. He doesn't like the bitter taste of reality. Because there's one point where one of the Juliets captures you, and she puts you in this, well, I think it's your Juliet. She puts you in this reality where you can stay with her forever. And he drinks coffee in there. And I was like, oh, maybe that's like what reality should be. Like the coffee is like some sort of like symbol for reality. And this is like a fake reality. And he's surprised. He's like, I don't usually like coffee, but I can drink it in this. And then once you beat the game, you wake up and it's an actual normal morning, and he drinks coffee. And he's like, I don't think he says anything about it, but like he's drinking the coffee. And I was like, oh, he's actually drinking the coffee. And I think it's I don't know. I saw some sort of symbolism there. I could be looking way too hard into it, but that's me trying to make sense of the game. And I think that's probably my favorite part about like what they were doing here, is there's just so much weird conceptual symbolic things in the game that I can't help but really like it, despite not knowing if I should recommend it, because I enjoyed a lot of the weird, strange, kooky things that happened in Romeo's a Deadman, and I want to play it over and like watch the cutscenes and like look at everything that they did, because I feel like that in and of itself makes it like a really good game. And I don't think a lot of people would say that. I think most people would agree that gameplay is usually what drives it forward, but I don't know, I think just it as a product, like the ideas they stuffed into this box and tried to make it sort of consistent, was enough for me to really think that this is like a game worth buying, because I kind of bought it on a whim. I'm not gonna lie. The trailer was like the goofiest thing that I saw at that state of play where it was revealed, and I bought it, and I remember that it was coming out. I saw it was $50. I was like, I have to drop $50 for this. I don't know. I just feel like something like that needs to be supported, in my opinion. So, you know, so while that was one of my favorite things, like the way that they told the narrative, I think a lot of like the visual elements in there too were also really good. Like a lot of the cutscenes were in this like comic book style. They had an opening sequence, almost like you were waking up, or, you know, it was maybe at night and you're gearing up for your favorite anime on Toonami. That was pretty cool. They do things like your hub is 16, I don't know. It's pixel art. It's basically like this really beautifully animated pixel art ship. Nuh-uh. Oh. This is how you get on the ship? Oh. They had a lady on the ship who was basically, she had like a dating sim minigame. Let me talk about the dating sim minigame, actually, because it tortured me. And I regret to say that I didn't make it through the dating sim minigame. She asked you, apparently, 100 questions. Now, each question she asked you will have 3 answers. You get one of them wrong, you have to redo the whole thing. And some nights I would sit there and get to like question like 50 something. And I would be like, okay, surely we're almost close to the end. And I would get an answer wrong. That means you got to go through and answer, memorize all the questions and get all the way back to the top. I made it to question 65 and I was like, fuck this. I was like, I'm not doing this. Anyway, yeah, I was like, fuck that shit. I'm not going to do this anymore. And I looked it up, and I don't know if the reward was really that worth it. It would have been worth it, I think, a little bit more if I had actually made it through, but you don't really get anything at the end. Spoilers for those who were maybe wanting to just go through it themselves and not really hear about what actually happens. But anyway, what else happens? There's a lot of like pixel art sequences. There's one part where once you escape the reality that Juliet sends you to, you go through there's a music video. I have no idea what's going on, but I like it. And yeah, there's just a lot of crazy visual. The UI is really cool. There's just a lot of crazy visual elements. You upgrade by playing a mini game. Yeah, there's just a lot of things about Romeo as a Deadman that I personally really liked, and I feel like walking through it wouldn't really do it justice, you know. And all the characters are weird and wacky. They all have weird names like Worst Pink, Green River, Silver Socks, Romeo, and the grandpa being on Romeo's back is like reminiscent of, like, I don't know, all the games coming out where you have like a buddy that travels with you, because that's been happening quite recently. Like Donkey Kong Bonanza did that, Death Stranding 2 did that, but doing that recently, Pragmata's gonna do that, so that was pretty cool. He doesn't talk as much out loud as much as I would like, but it's cool to have the grandpa with you, because they do have dialogue parts where it's not spoken, but they do have dialogue parts that show up as you're playing the game, and it's cool to have him there with them. And oh, I do want to say one thing. Romeo feels like Denji from Chainsaw Man, because it feels like he's being strung along. There's moments where like someone will say something and it's kind of like long-winded and you didn't get it, and you could say, there were moments where I said out loud, I don't get it, and then Romeo right after me would be like, this makes no sense.
I destroyed the world in order to see you, Romeo.
Why?
I wonder. I think my consciousness is making me do it. For the sake of the New World Order.
What?
Am I supposed to understand what you're talking about?
I'm glad Romeo doesn't know.
I'm going to destroy this.
That means I'm okay at not knowing. And I'm like, I feel like they know that I don't get it. I feel like I'm Romeo in that situation, and that's kind of cool, because he's just this person that's just trying to find Juliet. That's like basically all he cares about. He does have a sense of justice, but it's not that big a deal to him from what I remember. And he's really looking for Juliet, and he just wants things simple. And it kind of can be you in a way. Like, you could be Romeo in this scenario and not really pay attention to a lot of the space-time stuff. Just know that you're looking for Juliet, and then you have to stop bad guys, and that's kind of it. There's a moment where spoilers, Grandpa Ben dies. That's your grandpa who turned you into Deadman, and Romeo for the first time actually tries to piece together what's going on himself, because the whole time he either had people on the ship telling him or Grandpa bent, and that was that was just a moment that I recognized. I was like, this is the first time he himself has just tried to piece together the situation and make a decision for himself, from what I remember anyway. And then it's going back to like the artistic elements in this. The final chapter, not the final chapter, but like the end credits chapter that plays is an alternate universe where Romeo is the villain and Luna, his sister, is in a mech, and it's 3D animated to look like 2D, and they fight. And I'm like, why? I don't know why that's in there, but like that was really cool, and I want to see more of that. Like if they made a number 2, that would be pretty sick. If you're piloting mechs, I don't know why you would be piloting mechs. I don't even know why I was in there, but it's cool. And I feel like that's Romeo as a Deadman, the game. It's like a bunch of really, really sick ideas. And I feel like you should play it almost like you're just waking up on a Saturday morning, or like staying up on a Saturday night, and you just play a chapter and you're just like, man, that was pretty sick what just happened in that chapter. You know, like I don't really think it's meant to be anything. Well, I mean, I think there's probably quite a bit of depth in what they did put in, but like I don't think it has to be anything deeper than that if you don't want it to be. And there's like really enjoyable elements if you do consume it that way. I think you can maybe look a little bit deeper into the lore and stuff, but I don't really know what you would find, because I'm not that good at digging that stuff up myself. So hopefully someone else does it and I just get to watch someone else talk about it. I'm not really good at that, but yeah, it's just, I don't know, this was just like a really good, it was like a surprise of 2026. I wouldn't be surprised if it's up there on my list, because I plan on making a list. So yeah, it's just a really cool AA game that feels like a game from the past that I really would have liked, but it's not from the past. So I don't really know what more I could say about it. Do I have anything else? I think that's pretty much it, because I don't really want to describe too much from the game. I think I could just leave it there, to be quite honest with you, and I think I've gushed about it enough. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Romeo is I can't confirm he is a dead man. I don't know what a dead man is, but apparently that's what he is. So yeah, kill the past. Don't stay focused on the past. Kill the past.
Shadows and glows.